welcome back to my author commentary for A Prince of Song and Shade. Today we're up to chapter 22, which is a pretty fun chapter. We have Cuinn slash the Shadowhawk and Talyn back together in another scene, which is always fun. They're heading off to a meeting with Senir that Cuinn has set up so that Talyn can investigate that a little bit further and understand a bit more about Senir and how that network works and how it interacts with the Shadowhawks network. But on the way to that meeting, they're ambushed by Vengeance members, and that fight in an alley is quite revealing on a number of different fronts. But despite the ambush, the chapter ends on a note of hope, where potentially there's a new lead, a very good lead for Shadowhawk and Talyn to follow. So, going back to the beginning of this chapter, Cuinn and Talyn are having a conversation as they head to this meeting. Talyn trying to understand a little bit more about Senir and how Senir's work interacts with the Shadowhawks. And during that conversation, Cuinn makes a passing comment about a Caledon investigation, to which his song magic picks up a reaction from Talyn that lets him know that even though he was joking, she actually is there to investigate on behalf of the Caledon, which feels like a gut punch for him. He keeps hoping and wanting that Talyn is there to help him primarily and only. It's such a wonderful thing for him to have that help, to have someone there with him, to not be doing all of this alone. And that hope kind of keeps tripping him up a little bit, because even though the smarter side of him knows that Talyn's purpose back in Mithrena can't be entirely about him or helping the Shadowhawk, his hope kind of gets ahead of that, and when he gets these reminders that she does have another purpose, that she's not just there for him, it really hurts. And it's understandable. He's had no one, he's had nothing for such a long time, and having someone like Talyn on your side is an incredible boon. But yeah, she's not just there for him. She does, when they pick up that conversation towards the end of the chapter, reassure him in some sense that she will never do anything to hurt the people of Dock City, in the same way she would never do anything to put the wolves at risk. And again, his song manager can tell that is honest and true, which reassures him partly. But yeah, he's reminded once again in this chapter that she might be helping him, she might be working with him, but he can't allow himself to trust her, rely on her in the way that he really, really wants to. We go from there. In the middle of that conversation is interrupted by the ambush. They're off to meet Senir. Obviously, they don't know yet that, spoiler alert, Senir is connected to Vengeance, that Senir is Vengeance, is running Vengeance, and has taken this opportunity to ambush them on the way to the meeting. There are a few interesting things that fall out of this fight. Primarily, the conflict that it draws out between Talyn and Cuinn. Until this point, even though Talyn doesn't know who the Shadowhawk is, their connection has been quite strong and quite easy, quite in sync. They have a rhythm. Partly that's because of their shared Doom Norwich blood, but it's also because their values align so strongly. What they care about aligns so strongly. So Talyn's motivations in coming back are myriad, but the one that really speaks to her the most, I think, is helping the Shadowhawk, helping the people of Dock City, even though she won't acknowledge that to herself. And so their connection's quite strong, and so far, even though they can't necessarily trust each other very much, and they both know that the other has other motives, that has other goals, they still have this instinctive kind of rhythm. But there is kind of a stark difference between them, and I wanted to draw that out and use this fight to do it. Talyn dispatches the ambushes with ease, with almost a bit of fun. She's pleased to have the opportunity to strike back. He struggles throughout the fight. He obviously engages in as much as he has to keep himself safe and to help Talyn. But any blow that he lands, as we learned in the very first chapter of this book, he feels it. It reverberates back on him. It hurts him. And it makes him shaky. It makes him sick. He's basically a liability in a fight like that. Whereas Talyn's merrily basically going along, killing left, right, and center with ease and without any necessarily obvious remorse, which comes... It doesn't necessarily come out hugely in this chapter, but it's the first indication of that real stark difference between them. She casually kills those two Vengeance members at the end who are under her control and aren't running anywhere. And that horrifies Cuinn. He feels like those murders are unnecessary because he feels like it's his fault as part of the ruling class of Mithrena that they are in a situation where they need to be criminals to survive. He feels like it's not their fault that their choices in life have been quite limited because of the way society is in Mithrena, and because that's the way a Condor ruling family has set up society. And so he feels that's his fault, whereas Talyn is far more pragmatic. These men, these warriors, threatened her wolves. They went after Andrus. They went after them just in that alley. She's dispatching a threat. And it's as simple as that to her. She won't leave these men alive to come back after her, after the Shadowhawk, after Cuinn, after her wolves. And it's very black and white for her. She doesn't have those same considerations. So it's quite interesting. This dynamic between them does come into play later on in the series as well. But I did want to use this opportunity of the fight and how they both reacted so differently to it to draw out that despite their kind of instinctive partnership, the instinctive connection between them, there are differences, and they're quite strong. Post this scene, the two of them, again, kind of building that back and forth rapport that they have, start to work out the connection that Vengeance might have to the recent murders in the Citadel. That Vengeance plan is potentially quite sprawling, quite complicated, and quite clever. Doesn't necessarily bring them any answers, but it does give them the first lead that potentially Vengeance could be behind all of this. It's also the first time that Cuinn mentions Rhea, I think, in this series. His childhood sweetheart, essentially a woman that was murdered before Cuinn, who intended to marry her, could do so, and whose death he's always placed at Mathanas' door. She comes into that again later on in this series, and continues to believe that Mathanas was behind it. Of course, we now, those of you who have read the story, Mathanas was not the one who killed Rhea. It was Azralan, because Cuinn was starting to grow into a threat, potentially, to his power, and he wanted to remove that threat. Cuinn marrying a wealthy, noble family would only increase his influence at court and the chance that he might one day be chosen as the heir. Obviously, Mathanas wasn't particularly happy about Cuinn's growth in power and influence as he got older either, but it was simply that Azralan acted first. I wouldn't necessarily say that Mathanas is an angel here, or that he, just because he didn't kill Rhea, that he wouldn't have at some point, or wouldn't have found some other way to curb Cuinn's growing power. But in this instance, Cuinn wrongly believes that Rhea was killed by Mathanas. And her death is obviously a formative kind of event for Cuinn. It's what turned him away from the path of becoming quite a strong and powerful prince in the Condor family, and made him instead go the path of shadows by becoming the Shadowhawk, donning the mask, and doing everything he does in secret, as opposed to doing it out in the open. And I think that's part of where Cuinn's ongoing shame and guilt comes from, those feelings he can't get rid of, because I think part of him thinks he should have been stronger after Rhea's death, and should have continued on the path he was on rather than going into the shadows. I think part of him feels like he had a responsibility to keep going the way he was going, and that fear led him to don the Shadowhawk's mask instead of continuing as a prince of Mithrena. I guess, leave it over to you what you think about that choice he made and whether it was the right one. I think at that moment when Rhea was killed, Cuinn wasn't capable of doing more, keeping in mind that he's a Dignorix child who'd been raised without a Dignorix parent or relative around him, and to be honest, quite astonishing that he'd come as far as he'd come without that support around him. So we end this chapter on a potential lead. Talyn is heading back to the Citadel to weapon up, while Cuinn keeps an eye on the Vengeance member that escaped the ambush so they can hunt him back to his lair. Of course, as we know, for the next couple of chapters, that plan is about to be blown up, but we will talk about that when we come to chapter 23. I hope you enjoyed this author commentary today. I hope you're enjoying them. If you have any questions or comments about this chapter or about any other chapters, please drop them in the link below. I'd be more than happy to chat about it. Otherwise, I really look forward to seeing you for the next chapter, chapter 23, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.